Well, it's martini time again on Friday, seems. I have two talks, one in the morning at 8, one at 5. That's my bookends. And I generate ideas and energy in the morning, and I generate some ideas with the gin. And in the middle of the day, I take a nap. So anyway, I've been to Costco, just got back, so I have no idea what we were going to talk about today. But then it just came to me because we've been listening on the radio to the failed Republican plan to fulfill the promise, 7-year promise of repeal Obamacare. Repeal and replace. So first it was just repeal, then it was R&R, repeal and replace. They finally got the chance to do it and couldn't do it. And why is that? They've got everything. Got both House, Congress, Senate, presidency. Finally, the presidency. And I've been talking a lot about in my talks and what I've been just experiencing with movies. And as you remember, I talked about, this is vertigo, by the way. You look at it backwards, you get the vertigo. But we watched this the other night, and I think I talked about it in the morning, or maybe I talked about it here. It all gets blurred. But vertigo is about losing your center. Vertigo means I'm falling into I can't hold on to anything. I've lost my center of gravity, my center of being. Everything I depended upon, I'm falling. It's a vortex. I'm going into the void. It's terror, you see. So this Hitchcock movie is about the terror of losing your center, which for Alfred Hitchcock, this movie was losing your bearings of reality, what's real and what isn't. And so Jimmy Stewart had to go through the dark night of the soul to restore reality because he had lost his center. And then last night, we watched, this is Hacksaw Ridge backwards. We watched that, and I talked about that movie this morning if you want to go back and pick it up. But that was about the center of this corpsman in the Battle of Okinawa. He was able to maintain his center in the chaos of the war by his vow. So he held his center by a vow, which was not to touch guns. And his paradox was, the irony of this was that he was a rifleman in a rifleman company that wouldn't touch a rifle. So anyway, I talked about that this morning. So anyway, we're looking at the GOP and why they have no center. If they had a center of power, they would be able to create policy. The center is your power. That the center generates your power, just like the vow generated the power for the corpsman to do superhuman results. And the vertigo is about the fear of loss of center. And we all know, here's something. See, I just have to connect dots from where I go. So what, this little gong, but this, so my wife was saying yesterday, somebody emailed her, and she said, oh, look, they've got a Buddha bowl, and it's called a Buddha bowl, and you get a Buddha bowl, it's got recipes in it. Vegetarian recipes or whatever Buddha recipes are. And she thought it was so neat, so now they're exchanging Buddha bowl recipes, you see. Well, a Buddha bowl, I thought that was really funny because Buddha wasn't a vegetarian. He died actually from contaminated pork. But the idea with the Buddha bowl is that it's empty. And the Buddha, it was the first 400 years of Buddhism, it was a monastic tradition just for monks. And all the monks had to have a bowl, and you would go out once a day and get food. So the community supported you by putting food in your Buddha bowl, you see. So it was a very, the monk was very, if he didn't get any, nobody put anything in his bowl, he wouldn't eat. So it was a basic just a practice of surrender, you see. Just like in the Sermon on the Mount, you know, the birds don't have any fear. God feeds the birds, you know. So it's kind of like, or a hitchhiker would just stick your thumb out and see where you go. So you're dependent upon the ride. If nobody gives you a ride, you stand there. So the Buddha bowl was kind of like an act of surrender, you see. So the Buddha bowl is a center. If the only thing the Buddhist monk had was the bowl and maybe a robe, that was it. You know, that was so this was their only connection to survival, which was an empty bowl. So this was their center. This was the one form that was their center, you see. And also their power through surrender. You see, if you give up everything and you own nothing and you have no attachments, you have great power. You even give up attachment to death. If you have no fear of death, you have more power over somebody who was afraid of death. Just look at the suicide bombers. If they don't fear death, they have more power over the soldiers who do fear death, you see. So, even in Hacksaw Ridge, they kept talking about these American soldiers. The Japs are crazy. They don't fear death. They just keep coming. They don't surrender. You know, they don't fear death. It's the warrior's duty to die. So there's a different center operating here. So in our culture, the center that we are conditioned to hold as our core is fear. So this fear of the vertigo becomes our center. We can orientate ourselves around this fear, or this fear of giving up our bowls, of giving up our possessions and everything, giving up our comfort, can be a centering center, you know. But anyway, I digress. We're getting back. I want to talk about the Republicans and why they've lost their center, even though they've got it all. Normally, traditionally, the president is a center of the nation. He's the one that centers the whole nation. He's the king, and every 4 years or 8 years, we kill the king by voting him out and electing a new. So the king is dead. Long live the king. So this is a dying and resurrected son, so to speak. He's sacrificed every 4 years or 8 years. We sacrifice him and resurrect a new one. So we keep renewing the power of the king, of the president. If you get a president who stays there for 50 years, he has to hold himself together through military power, or somehow that's what other countries do. The king doesn't die, doesn't leave, so his charisma is drained, and he has to hold his power together through corruption and military power. All right, so we just sacrifice our king, our center, every 4 or 8 years, you see. And the charisma is renewed. The new president comes in, new charisma, new power, you see. So Trump comes in, charisma, power, but it didn't help the GOP. And so I was thinking about that. Why was that, you see? Now, I think there's a contradiction in the Republicans that that gives them two centers that are competing. You see, when you have your center, there's only one center, and it integrates your whole world. It integrates your body and your mind. The 1 second without a second. But if you've got two competing centers, you're going to get into a wow, 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 and you can't do anything. If you have two competing centers, you end up like that. It's always the threat of loss of center because you can't get it. So what are the two competing centers I was thinking today? Well, one imperative of the Republican Party since Reagan is that government is the enemy. Government's the enemy. Get rid of it. Deconstruct it. Take away its power. Defang it. Starve it to death. Don't give it any taxes. Make it anorexic. Put it in a concentration camp. Reduce it down to ribs. You see, starve that sucker. Right? That's one of the imperatives. What's the other imperative? I want to govern. I want to unite the country. So this is a contradiction. I want to govern, and I want to not govern. See, you can't govern if you take away the government, if you destroy or deconstruct the government. That's a contradiction. If you're going to govern, you have to use government. If you're not going to govern, in other words, if you deconstruct and take away all the power of the government and give it to corporations, you're not going to be able to govern. You got no power. But the other imperative is you got to govern. Get the presidency. Become a unified. Paul Ryan talks about this. The dream of the Republicans was a unified government where you get the presidency, the Congress, and the Senate. You got the whole thing. And you get enough majority so you can just bypass the dysfunctional Democrats. You got it all. But what happens is they got this, right? What is that? And I think it's a contradiction in their philosophy, in their existence, which has evolved over decades, and that. And I remember well when Reagan came in and he said the worst thing to happen is if the government comes to say, and I'm coming to help you. So the GOP, not having communism in the Cold War anymore, having to have an enemy that would unite the Republicans, made the enemy the government. So this works great when you're out of power, because then you can keep saying the government's bad, the government's bad. You see, Obama's got it. Obama's the evil Obama government. That's bad. Everything, the government, bad, bad, bad. Obama, bad, 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 you see. But when you get all the power, now you're the government. So there's a big faction in the GOP and the Congress that wants to deconstruct the government. And there's another faction that wants to govern. And you can't do both at the same time. You see? You can't simultaneously not govern and govern at the same time. This is like the mother telling the kid, try to be spontaneous. Okay, you get, or as a photographer, the mother would say, try to smile now, and the kid would go, like that, and I would have to deconstruct the smile, or don't smile. Right? So the Republicans have to deconstruct their philosophy and make friends with the government, which they are. Otherwise, they've got two competing imperatives that are contradictory. And they're not going to get shit done, frankly, unless they figure that out. And Trump is not that big of a help, you see, because he's got, it didn't help this time, let's put it that way. I think the GOP thought with Trump as the new president, with his charisma and his deal-making abilities, that they'd be able to swing this big movement. They bet the whole thing on this one. I mean, this was a poker game, and they bet the whole the whole bank out there, and and they folded. They lost it. So there really has to be I think the Republicans are going to have to really rethink and understand these, and I don't know if they can, because there is a Freedom Caucus in there, or these Tea Party people that they elected back when they wanted to get rid of Obamacare, if you remember. They elected a big, huge Tea Party group who were all deconstructionists. No government, bad government, get rid of the whole thing, starve it to death, you see. So as long as that's there, whatever they try to do with this hand is going to vote against it. Gridlock, vertigo. Okay, so yes, just to finish up, yesterday, this evening, I talked about Trump as a reincarnated hippie. Well, I got a lot of comments on that today, and people didn't really understand what I was saying with that. What I was trying to picture was not a hippie like with the long hair and the beads, but the hippies were a flowering in the 60s of a shift in consciousness from external concern with the objective world to a concern with me and my feelings. Me, subjective, my rights, a subjective center, a center shifted. In the 50s, the center was the objective society. So your duty was to conform to society. If there was a war, it was your duty to go. You didn't say, I don't want to go to war because it doesn't feel right. You see, you don't have any individual rights. Your rights are to obey the rules and laws and rituals of your society. You were supposed to fit into the fabric of society. That is the virtue. That is where your center is. Your center is in the society. And this was the World War II unity of total surrender to the war. You see, everybody went. Even if you were a conscientious objector, you didn't stay home and go to Canada. You see, you like in Hacksaw Ridge. So the center shifted from the whole to the I, and we call that the me generation. All right, so the me generation became the baby boomers, and now they're the ones, most of them, because the millennials didn't elect Trump, the baby boomers elected him. So the baby boomers have and the millennials are not like this, you see. That's where we're really into another cultural divide here, or shift in center. So, but the baby boomers, the me generation, their center has been subjective, and it's been on feelings. So when Trump comes along, he is kind of like an embodiment of that. Values, you see, the baby boomers wanted values, family values. That's feelings. It's not policy. They wanted feelings. They want to feel connected. They want to feel their center. They want to feel their power. It's based in feelings, you see, not abstract policy things, in other words. So they were based in, and we can see this in politics. Most of the Republican political message has been value. Trump is a value speaker. It talks in big, small, big, great, tremendous. These are value statements. So he's a value preacher, which spoke to the baby boomers who are value-centered, subjective, okay? Not duty to country. They want to not duty to government. Government and country is the same, by the way. It's not duty to government, see, but freedom. That's a subjective value. Freedom from government, subjective. So that's why I meant when I was saying that Trump was kind of like a reincarnated hippie, which is exaggerated. But I think you can get the idea that I'm talking about the reason he communicated with the baby boomers was because he was speaking values, you see. And this value system, the subjective value system, is in direct conflict with the liberal secular humanism that is our whole society and the Western civilization. The Western civilization is a liberal, secular, humanistic culture. It's materialistic. It makes stuff, okay? It's not a theocracy, which is a value system. You see, it's not, and so we're looking at a direct conflict. And I remember when I used when my sister-in-law, my wife's brother, and lived here, and I got to know them. They were evangelicals who were serious. I mean, they did it completely. They were totally 700 Club, a resource center for all this information, Christian right, evangelical, or in Fox News. So they watched Fox News. They didn't watch anything else, just Fox News and sermons. That was it. And she kept talking about the secular humanists run by the devil. The secular, who are the secular humanists? Well, that's our civilization. Rational, scientific, and secular, meaning it's not run by a preacher. It's not run by a cleric like Iran, you see. So anyway, so the secular humanists, became the liberals. So the people were hating the liberals, they're hating, it's all mixed up, you see, because you hate the liberals, you're hating the government, they're hating secular humanists, you're hating the Western civilization. You want to be in a little tribe of personal values of freedom, like in a little bubble, where the center is a personality. So Trump creates a center for those who have lost their center. If you lose your center, which means you lose your job and your place in the world, you lose your power. So Trump came and offered center power. Restore America means restore your center, but it's subjective. It's not restoring the objective America, it's restoring your America, your center, your feeling of power, you see. So he's a feeling president. He restores your feeling of power and center, you see, by identifying with him. So he says, I'm your voice. You and I have the same, I'm your voice, you see. I'll restore you if you identify with me as your center. So in a sense, it's very religious. Religious is a subjective reality. You see, religion exists to maintain your personal center. It gets confused because if you try to get it into politics, but basically religion exists to restore and maintain your center. Okay? And so the way I see this, now, I may be wrong, but I'm just saying my view, is that the Trumpism is a religion, is a secular religion, because it restores your feeling of center. If you join it, you have to get under the tent. And you have to do that, you see. If you do that, you feel powerful. You feel Trump's power, right? The winner. The lose-lose double bind goes away, and you get a win-win. Okay? So I hope this helps us understand a little bit what's going on. I'm not finding fault. I'm just trying to find understanding. Because it's very difficult to understand from one view. If you just look at it from the objective view, it's very you can't understand the subjective view. They're not communicating. They're going like this. So understanding requires dropping our fault finding and just saying they're all idiots or crazy or whatever. That's not understanding. So any fault finding or negation of the other side is not understanding. Understanding is when you can see both views as both being valid but contradictory, so that nothing happens when they're in conflict. So we'll leave it with that, and thank you for catching me a little bit later, and I'll finish my martini, and I'll see you in the morning at our moment of Zen.